Folks, welcome back to the ISD Official Visit Recruiting Podcast. We're back. This is by popular demand. I got my man Jamie Uyeyama back. We did an episode a few weeks ago where we had Jamie kind of break down prospects and commits, film live so everyone can see the kind of process he goes through. So we're going to do that again. Jamie, thanks a lot for joining us, man.
Thanks, man. It was a really good response from last time, so excited about it.
All right, so we got a few guys. We got a few Notre Dame commits to talk about, and one target, and then we have another potential target to add. First up, though, let's look at some highlights from 2022 Notre Dame linebacker commit Jaylen Sneed. He's been doing a great job so far this season, and let's see if we can get some highlights up of him.
Yeah, Sneed, I think what's interesting, and you'll see as the highlights go along here, but obviously you see him here at safety, and you see the guy come downhill, and he's violent, but you kind of see him all over the place. And, if you watch any of his junior film, you saw him line up and play on the edge. And here you see him blitzing off the edge here. You see how he can become violent that way. And he really is very likely to start out at Rover. For Notre Dame, and he just has the skill set where he can really succeed there. Here, he's off the ball in the box, coming down as a linebacker. You see him get skinny there and explode. But yeah, coming downhill again as a safety, making a tackle. This is a guy who can tackle in space. He's a great athlete. I think you saw some of the stuff with Notre Dame running dollar. I know it's not Notre Dame fans' favorite thing right now, but when you have a guy like this kid, you can play dollar and you can do these things because he's a guy who can carry a tight end down the seam. He can blitz off the edge, and like you're seeing on a lot of these clips here too, he can do a lot of different things that it makes the defense more versatile. And he's a havoc producing player, and I think that's what you're going to see is that. I don't know if he's going to be an instant impact guy right away, but he's going to be a guy in the long term who can do a lot of different things if as long as he has a knowledge base of the defense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We got a couple offensive commits to look at. Receivers. First of all, let's look at Tobias Merriweather out of Washington. He's been having a huge year out there, doing a lot of things on both sides of the ball. Really, in all three phases, he's been taking off offensively. Defensively, he's been getting pick sixes. He's been returning kicks to the house. Just a force.
Yeah, and I think you saw just in that last clip him being able to kind of sink his hips. He's a big guy, but he can sink his hips. He can run routes. I think he's got to be more refined as a route runner, but there's a lot of things that he can do well in terms of just being an athlete. And you see him at corner as well. Here he's just running, like a quick corner route. He's got some burst out of his breaks. I think he's going to play the boundary for Notre Dame. Make some guys miss after the catch. He can do all that kind of things, right? And obviously, when you mentioned with his stuff in the return game as well. And man, I think he lined up in the slot here. A big guy who can line up the slot. You kind of seen some of this with Kevin Austin and what he can do out of the slot. But this guy is going to be a boundary receiver for Notre Dame. He has, can track it well, can track it over his shoulder well. He's got enough speed to get deep and be that kind of deep threat on the boundary, and really kind of has the skills to be the guy that I compared him to when he committed to Notre Dame was N'Keal Harry, which, people in New England, maybe not the biggest fans of, I know, because he hasn't been that productive there, but watch his film from Arizona State and see what he did there and why he became a first round pick. And that's the kind of talent that I think Tobias Merriweather has. Notre Dame fans should be very excited about this guy.
N'Keal Harry, big-time college football fantasy producer back in the day.
Great fantasy, yeah.
This is how fast Merriweather was. It was this short area quickness stuff that I think I kind of underestimated on him. As the change of direction, the ability to take this screen and go, inside, outside, and just house that thing. Man, I think I shortchanged him early on, not realizing how he wasn't just a long strider.
And I think that's where playing corner helps him. Right. That, the quick change of direction, all that kind of stuff. So that's why, as much as you want someone to thrive and be and play and specialize and be the kind of player that they're going to be and play that position that they're going to play at the next level, it's a good idea to play multiple sports, to play different positions, because you bring those other traits with you. And I think you're seeing those other traits there with him at receiver.
Next guy, another Notre Dame receiver commit, has been having a big time, is CJ Williams from California. He's playing at Mater Dei, the number 1 team in the country. Just had a big game this past weekend over St. John Bosco. CJ Williams, obviously a huge target. What are we seeing from him this time?
I think CJ Williams is going to be a stud at Notre Dame. I'm a big fan of his. I know that, we had some people on our side who thought he was maybe a bit overrated, but now they're kind of seeing his senior film and kind of seeing where he's at. I think he's a kid who's going to play right away. You saw him blocking in that one other clip. He's a guy who's big, 6'2", 190. He's going to be physical there, can actually get out and block. There's going to be plays like this where he's running free, and he's not going to be running free that often, but you see him make a contested catch there. And that's one thing that he's really good at. You see him kind of bend that route there and be able, like, that sells the route. He is a super advanced route runner for his age. You just don't see a lot of guys who can do that kind of thing. And I think he's just so far ahead of where most guys are. And I think you see him lining up in the slot here. And this is where I think he's going to start right away. Because obviously, Notre Dame's going to lose Avery Davis. But in the slot, they don't really have an obvious next slot guy. And I think there's going to be an opportunity for CJ Williams to start immediately. He has that kind of potential to do that. And I mean, you're not even seeing it in this clips, but the way this kid adjusts to the football when it's in the air, it's special, right? It's special. He can track it over the shoulder better than almost any kid you'll see in the country. And I think, when you're playing at Mater Dei and you're playing at that high level and you're always constantly playing against top competition and you're producing like he is, that says a lot about his talent level too.
Maybe it's the Mater Dei, maybe it's the number 8, maybe it's playing receiver, but he reminds me, just watching it, of Amon-Ra. Just watching this. I mean, Amon-Ra was just such a beast. He was just, his compete level was so high. I'm not sure the exact same players, but it's hard not to see the comparison.
I think, skills wise, it's hard to match what Amon-Ra. He's not catching a touchdown and punching it into the stands like Amon-Ra. Amon-Ra, one of our favorite kids ever to cover at a camp, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. So let's get back over to the target here in 2023, linebacker Drayk Bowen. You had a chance to see him in person with Matt Freeman earlier this year, right?
I did get a chance to see him, and it's funny because in that game, we were begging for him to rush the passer for how the coaches were using it. It wasn't what Drayk was doing. They just had him basically playing as like a space backer like this. And, he was kind of outside of the play. Like here, you see them moving him around, playing inside, playing outside, doing all these things, blitzing. I mean, he must have blitzed like twice in the entire game that we watched. And you can see the impact this guy makes. This guy is violent. He is violent. He is twitchy. And he's a guy who has to do so much for his team. Like he goes to a small school. It's, they're not a total powerhouse. They have like tight ends basically playing guard for them. So they're not the most loaded team. And he has to play running back. He has to catch the ball in the backfield. He has to do all these things. But you see the talent level here. You see him get, skinny through the hole as a blitzer there too. I think his future is as an inside linebacker. Probably going to be like a linebacker, and he is someone who needs to physically develop more, but I know he puts in a lot of time in the weight room. He's a super hard worker, obviously an elite baseball player as well. Notre Dame's recruiting him in that aspect too. He's just a really, really good athlete, and actually a better football player than he is an athlete, which says a lot, obviously, when you're that good at baseball too. And I think, when I look at him, I see him, rated as a 5-star. I don't see him quite as a 5-star level, but definitely a top 100 level kid. And now that he's seems to be being used in the proper way, and they're getting him more involved and, working him as an inside linebacker, I think that's exactly where he needs to be. And once he's able to kind of specialize and kind of like get taught, work under Marcus Freeman, and get taught the defense at Notre Dame and become more technically sound, I think the sky's the limit for him. I think he can be a big time player.
One word when I watched him: explosive. I mean, he's explosive just to the ball, to the carrier. I mean, he's just blowing things up, and it doesn't seem like a guy that would be fun to play against if you're a ball carrier.
No, and he would not be fun against. And one thing that kind of stood out to me too when seeing him in person, he wasn't really like a rah guy, but he just kind of like had like a quiet confidence about him. But then when he did go and make a big impact play, you saw the beast come out, right? And you saw that kind of thing. And to me, that also reminds me a little bit of Drew Tranquill, where obviously Drew Tranquill's maybe a bit more vocal. But also too, there was something the way that Drew Tranquill kind of carried himself where you're like, oh, this guy's a dude, right? And obviously you're seeing that in the NFL right now. He's playing really well for I almost called them the San Diego Chargers, Los Angeles Chargers. So he has, I mean, it's not just like an Indiana thing that I'm making that comparison. I just really think athletically and how they move and how they play football, I see a lot of similarities there.
One more guy to add to the board, possibly, right? So Notre Dame offered Davison Igbinosun back in February, and he's a 2022 cornerback from New Jersey. He just decommitted from Rutgers, and I don't know. I think that Notre Dame might be interested in him. Maybe we'll go check him out this weekend when I hit the road. What do you remember from Davison, from you checking him out? And is he a guy you think Notre Dame should take another look at?
I think I'm all for it. I liked him. He's a two-way athlete guy. He plays both ways for his school. Really long, a long strider, but he's got some suddenness and good ball skills. Just a good wrap tackler too. And the guy that I put in my notes, I know, he's a favorite of yours at Matt Freeman's. And obviously Notre Dame fans are well aware of him after playing Cincinnati. But Sauce Gardner is the guy physically he reminds me of the guy that he can become. And I mean, if he becomes Sauce Gardner, I mean, that's an All-American corner, and I think you'll take it. I mean, of course, Sauce Gardner at the same time is about 115 pounds soaking wet. So he's a little bit more advanced than him, but still got some more physical, advancement to do. But I was a little bit surprised. I haven't been following his recruitment that closely, but obviously Rutgers seems like they've got things turned around. And they're on a good track right there. But for that guy to become available, I'm sure a lot of schools will be after him. And even though I like the DB commits that Notre Dame has in this class, he's definitely a kid that I think they should be after and still targeting, because I think he has a very high ceiling.
Yeah, I think something tells me that they will be. So you'll probably be hearing more about Davison in the coming days. So, all right, Jamie. Well, I know you're a busy man when it comes to the Irish Sports Daily podcast world, and you got to go join the boss man soon for another power hour. But we really appreciate you coming on and breaking it down and kind of giving us a peek behind the scenes of how you do it.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you having me.